I had been married to Janet for 12 years. Since we were 10 years old, we had been in love. I accepted an entry-level position as a draftsman at Desmond Engineering straight out of high school because I had no interest in going to college. After a year of marriage, Janet and I welcomed twin girls, Bethany and Brittany, into our family the following year. For the first few years, things weren't easy, but we managed our finances well, and everything turned out okay. Although I was a few grade levels above when I started, I was still a draftsman. Although better, the finances were still tight. We owned 2 decent cars and had saved enough money for a small house. Although they weren't brand new, they weren't junk. Janet never worked because her dream job was to be a stay-at-home mother. I didn't mind because we didn't need the additional cash. We were in good health and physical condition. Janet had gained a small amount of weight since our marriage, but not much. She had dark brown hair that was worn with bangs, and her height was slightly over 5 feet. She had Marie Osmond's small-sized appearance. Nothing had changed about me. I wasn't small, but I wasn't flabby either, because I played right tackle for the high school football team. Billy Martin, a surveyor at Desmond Engineering, relocated to Reading from Lancaster approximately a year ago. After playing football against one another for years, Billy and I quickly became friends. Sarah, a redhead, was his high school sweetheart, and they were married. Jan and Sarah clicked right away. Although they were childless at the moment, they made excellent babysitters when we weren't at work. Billy and I cherished our time together. A welcome diversion from the wives was had. Janet and Sarah were, of course, doing the same thing. Billy and I would watch the girls and television while they went shopping and attended parties and club meetings. Additionally, Sarah was hired as a secretary at Gilbert Engineering, which is located close to the town. It was about 6 months ago that I first noticed things. PTA meetings were held once a month, but they are now held once a week. Despite not having children, Sarah regularly attended the meetings with January parties with Magic Chef and Tupperware seemed to be happening more often every month, but they never purchased anything. Despite joining a book club, they were never able to make time for reading. They would spend hours shopping on the weekends, but they would rarely make a purchase. Janet always seemed to have more and more fancy underwear, but I never got to enjoy any of it. It began to bother me. Billy seemed to be unaware of it, so I never brought it up to him. If nothing was going on, I didn't want to stir things up. I put the girls to bed, and Jan returned home from some kind of basket party about an hour later. She showered before Sarah picked her up, and she showered again the moment she arrived home. I thought that was strange. I quickly checked the hamper while she was taking a shower and discovered a pair of black lace underwear. Who would show up at a basket party wearing black lace underwear? Though I don't usually, I checked my wife's underwear tonight and noticed that the crotch was wet and sticky. They go in my pocket. Until tonight, I had never searched through my wife's wallet or purse. Her cell phone was the only thing that genuinely caught my attention. Given that she hadn't erased any calls in the previous week, it seemed that she was fairly confident that I wouldn't be prying. The majority of calls went to Sarah, but KC, KH, and Kilowatt received a sizable portion of both incoming and outgoing calls. I had no idea who they were, of course, but I quickly figured out that the W probably represented work, the H stood for home, and the C for cell. Sarah also had 3 numbers listed in her address book, which I looked through: Sarah C, Sarah H, and Sarah W. I was astounded by my wife's phone's organization. Sarah's work number had an extension, so I looked it up. Upon examining the Kilowatt number, I noticed that it was identical to Sarah's, albeit with a distinct extension. It was not difficult to determine that Janet had been receiving calls from a person who was employed by Sarah. Furthermore, it didn't take long to deduce that Janet had met the enigmatic K thanks to Sarah. Since Gilbert Engineering was currently closed, I used Janet's phone to call the Kilowatt number. "Hi, you've arrived at Kim Sanders' desk. I will respond to you as soon as I can if you leave your name and phone number, even though I am not at my desk at the moment." After the beep, I immediately hung up. That was much too simple. "John, are you coming to bed?" Janet glanced around the entrance. I'm almost done with this book. If I don't fall asleep on the couch, I'll be up as soon as I'm done. I was planning to sleep on the couch, of course. The night was quite restless. I was always trying to find out what went wrong or what I could have done better. It was an awful waste of time and energy. My thoughts would always return to what I should have done, no matter how many times I tried to divert them. I stared at the clock, but it was motionless. All I was certain of was that I would not take responsibility for the events that had occurred or were about to occur. The sounds of my two tiny angels preparing breakfast woke me up. Rather than expecting them to wait on them, Janet urged them to take care of themselves. It seemed like a good idea that would work. My wife came in and I started to stretch and scratch. You better hurry, John, or you will be late for work. No issue. I'm off from work today. Why? You never neglect your work. Too many personal problems. I stumbled toward the bathroom, yawning. I was in need of a shower. Janet appeared somewhat bewildered upon my return. The girls were on their way to school already. Reluctantly, I got a cup of coffee and sat down across the table from my wife. She raised her gaze to me as though she was expecting something but wasn't sure what. I didn't feel like beating around the bush when I said, "Tell me about your affair," but I had a good feeling she wasn't going to just open up and spill her guts. John, please get serious. Is this the reason you've been sulking? Is it truly your belief that I am unfaithful to you? All right, tell me about your liaison now. John, it's been 12 years since our marriage. Janet, why would you even consider such a thing? I'm not going to sit here and play games with you because I have stuff to do today. Tell me about your affair, please. I'll ask you again. My devoted wife leaned in my direction and sighed in frustration. It's all in your head, John. Nothing is wrong with the affair. Well, I'd like to thank you for your honesty, but I can't, now can I? As though she'd taken charge of the situation, she leaned back in her chair and took a sip of her coffee. Can you answer a few easy questions for me? Yes, John, without a doubt. Do you want to know something? Why do you go to PTA meetings every week when the secretary of the PTA says they only have monthly meetings and you haven't been to any for 6 months? I'm not sure what you're talking about. She appeared somewhat less. You and Sarah go to non-existing PTA meetings every Tuesday. Now, why would you fabricate such a thing? Janet struggled with the question for a moment and then came up with an answer. I sincerely apologize, John. Ladies' night at Rose's Cantina is on Tuesday, and Sarah and I have been taking advantage of the 2-for-1 margarita special. We didn't want you and Billy to think we were messing around, so we didn't tell you. I apologize, it was my error. Moving forward, we will apprise you. Well done, Janet. It goes without saying that I will investigate that. Sarah will undoubtedly support you, but what about Rose's staff members? John, you are exaggerating the situation. Why do you take a shower before leaving for your little Tupperware parties and the like and again when you get home? Once more, she took her time. Many of the women who attend those parties smoke. I want to wash the smell out of my hair when I get home. John, it's not a huge deal. Why do you attend these parties wearing fancy underwear? Other than on special nights, you never dress sexily for me. You dress to impress every evening you spend with these housewives. Why not? To that, I have no good response. Sometimes all I want is to feel put together when I go out. Her lies were starting to get to me like crazy. It was time for it to end. It was hard for me to contain my rage. These are the panties you wore last night. I threw them onto the surface. When you got home, the crotch was wet and sticky from something. I am aware of what juice is and that it isn't mine. I swear I'll hit you if you try to tell me you have a yeast infection. By now Janet was wriggling in her chair. She tried not to give me a look. There didn't seem to be a prompt response. Janet, screw it. Why did you wear juice-stained underwear when you returned home last night? I'm looking for a response. John, stop it. Simply put, quit. This is too much for me to handle. Our marriage spanned 12 years. How is this how you treat me? I eventually became weary of the never-ending barrage of lies and denial. I threw my half-filled coffee cup across the room with all the force I could muster, breaking the front of the microwave oven. This time, there was no question that I had Janet's attention. She had never seen me angry before, so I had never seen that look on her face before. I leaned across the table to give her a direct look and spoke up more than I had before. Who the hell is Ken Sanders? In an attempt to avoid me, she pushed herself out of the chair and retreated towards the sink. For the last goddamn time, who the hell is Ken Sanders? She said, a friend, just a friend, terrified beyond belief as she spoke. Did you have sex with him? Yes, I had sex with him. Did you have sex with him last night? Yes, I did, exactly. John, please put an end to this. I apologize, just stop, please. She was crying uncontrollably as she stood by the sink. I started to sit down as soon as I grabbed a cup from the cabinet and poured myself some fresh coffee. Janet picked up her phone. Her gaze flicked back and forth between the phone and me. Ken sent it. I believe we ought to respond to it. I selected the speaker and took the call. Sweetheart, good morning. Upon arriving at work, I noticed that you attempted to reach me last night at my work number. Janet, did you leave anything at the house? Maybe I should say, sugary. Janet looked embarrassed. There was quiet for a while. Janet, what's up? Is there a problem? Her expression looked terrified as she looked at me. I gave her a nod in response. Ken? Ken? She paused. My husband is here, Ken. He is aware of us. The phone is on speaker for him. He didn't answer, but he also didn't hang up. I felt it was my duty to clear him. Ken, good friend, I promised to come see you this afternoon, but I have a few things to do this morning. Perhaps you ought to set your speed dial to 911. I hung up and returned the phone to my pocket. Janet shivered and stood in her bathrobe by the sink. I have to leave right now. One more question for you. John, what's the name of the guy Sarah is seeing? No, please don't make me. The second cup shattered into the tile wall behind the sink after flying across the room. She staggered back and spoke too quickly. Calvin. Bostic, Calvin. I'll be returning this afternoon. Before then, make sure everything is gone from your home. Up until we can arrange for another place to stay, my mother will remain with the girls. I will deliver anything for you that you are unable to fit in your car. Tell my mom where you plan to be. Please don't call me. As I walked out the door, she remained still and said nothing more. Naturally, I was clueless about what to do next. I made the decision to stop by Billy's workplace. Since I considered him a friend, I believed he ought to be aware of what was happening. It wasn't too difficult to deduce that Sarah became friends with Calvin after meeting him at work. Ken was most likely Calvin's friend in need of a date. It might have been a bit oversimplified, but I thought it was close enough. Billy wasn't present at work. He was outside at a location, putting in steaks or something. I gave him a call on his cell. Billy, I hate to bother you, but I have bad news. Is somebody hurt? Not yet, but they're going to be. What the hell are you talking about, John? Janet and Sarah have gotten themselves a couple of boyfriends. On all those nights that they were supposed to be going to meetings and Tupperware parties, they were really getting together with them. Are you sure? I don't believe you, John. It sounds like some kind of, to me. Ask Sarah about a guy named Calvin Bostic. He works at Gilbert with her. I think she introduced Janet to another guy from there also. Are you sure? Damn it, John. I know Calvin Bostic. We were in the same graduating class. How about a guy named Ken Sanders? Yeah, him too. Tall, skinny fellow. Billy, I figure that Janet is going to give Sarah a heads up as soon as she can. Janet gave me a whole line of crap this morning before I pinned her down. I'm sure you will get the same runaround from Sarah. Billy hung up the phone, and I went to personnel to request a short vacation. I didn't feel like working right now. It only took 10 minutes to shift the work that I had ongoing to another draftsman. About that time, Janet's cell phone rang. Caller ID showed that it was Sarah. Janet, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from Billy. He is coming to the office. I think somebody told him something. I didn't answer her. Janet, are you there? This is not a good time to be playing games. Hi, Sarah. This is John. I had to borrow Janet's cell phone this morning. Mine was dead. What are you talking about, Sarah? What exactly did somebody tell Billy? I couldn't help myself. I felt mean and nasty at that moment. I'm sorry, John. I thought I was calling Janet. I'll try and get her at home. I don't think you should bother her right now. She is really busy getting all her stuff packed. She doesn't have time to chat. What do you mean by getting her stuff packed? She is going to be moving back in with her parents for a while. The pause at the other end of the line was hilarious. I was smiling as I imagined all the scenarios that were going through Sarah's head. I think it might be more important for you to tell Calvin that Billy is on the way over. Oh God, no. This can't be happening. No, no. She hung up on me. The nerve of that woman. We only had one credit card, so cancelling it was no problem. We also had an ATM debit card. It took me 5 minutes to change the PIN number. I had no idea what to do with the checking account, so I just ignored it for now. I needed it to pay the utilities and other bills anyhow. I was just hoping that Janet did not take any checks with her. The cell phone rang again, but this time it was mine. Billy had chased Calvin Bostic out of the Gilbert building and caught him in the parking lot. He was in jail and wanted me to tell his brother in Lancaster to come up and post bail for him. I called his brother. There was nothing else I could do for Billy, so I went to Taco Bell. After lunch, I stopped by to see my mom and dad. I explained everything to them. Mom was more than willing to watch the girls for a while. During the week, she would stay at my place, and on the weekends, the twins would stay with them. Now it was time to visit Ken Sanders. The guys in the drafting department at Gilbert couldn't wait to tell me about Billy's visit that morning. The drafting department overlooks the parking lot, and they saw all the action. Billy caught Calvin before he could reach his BMW. He threw him over the hood of one of the cars and began smashing his face. The security guards followed them out and tried to pull Billy off, with no success. Finally, one of them hit Billy in the neck with a taser. He was still out when they stuck him in the police car. They had to haul Calvin away in an EMT vehicle. One of the guys showed me the cubicle where Ken Sanders worked. It was empty. Seems like old Ken suddenly quit this morning. We went by Sarah's desk, and she was not there either, but it looked as if she still worked there. 10 minutes later, I had Ken's home address, and I was headed for the parking lot. It was a small ranch house with no garage. There was a white Lexus in the driveway with the trunk and back doors open. As I walked up to the door, Ken Sanders was coming out with an armload of clothing. He dropped everything and rushed back into the house as soon as he saw me. I ran after him but stumbled over the stuff he dropped and managed to see him going out the back as I entered. I had to laugh at his reaction. Hell, I wasn't like Billy. I was a nice guy. It looked like the type of place that was rented fully furnished, that's why he didn't have a truck. In another 10 minutes, he would have been done and out of town. I was looking forward to having a chat with Ken, but didn't feel like chasing him to do it. I looked around the room for anything interesting and got a few nice surprises. The first thing I picked up was his cell phone. It was on a desk in the living room, beside a folder containing his passport and some personal papers. On the dining room table was a nice little laptop computer. I couldn't find anything else, so I gathered up the few goodies that I had and left. I didn't want to do anything that could be considered criminal, so I resisted the impulse to trash his car. It was beautiful. I imagined that taking items from the house was a crime, but hell, he left the door open, and anybody could have picked them up. Unable to fully control myself, I let the air out of just one of his tires. He would have to empty the trunk to get to the spare, and I am sure he would be doing it with one eye on the street, looking for me. "I'll get him later," he got the message. I swung by the jail to see Billy. His brother was there, and they were busy doing legal stuff, so I just waved at him and smiled. It looked like he had everything under control. Mom was already at the house and had supper started. We chatted a little, and then I took the stuff I picked up at Kin's into the den, where I kept my computer and stuff. Before I could get a look at anything, Beth and Britt got home from school. I decided it would be better to tell them what was going on before they asked. I didn't get the chance. "Hi, Dad. What's Nana doing here? Where is Mom?" Bethany beat me to the punch. "Your mom and I have decided to take a little break from each other. She will be staying at her parents' place for a while." Brittany started smiling, and Beth rolled her eyes and moaned, I win, I told you so." Britt was gloating about something, and her sister was frowning. "What's going on? What is so funny?" Brittany volunteered to explain. "Beth and I had a bet. I said that Mom was cheating on you, and she said it would never happen. It looks like I won. I never said anything about your mother cheating. We are not stupid, Dad, and don't treat us like children. We know what is going on. I just didn't want to admit it. Britt is right, Mom is cheating on you." "How did you know this?" "I just found out. You are a little slow, Dad, and a little too trusting." Britt put her arm around my shoulder. It felt odd, a 12-year-old girl trying to comfort her father. One Saturday when Mom and Sarah said that they were going shopping at King of Prussia, Mom wouldn't let Britt and me go along. She said it was a grown-up shopping day, and she would make it up to us later. When we got to school on Monday, a couple of the kids said they saw her with a guy at Noble's Grove. We called them liars, but one of the girls had a cell phone picture. It seemed pretty cut and dry. I thought there must be an explanation, but Britt said she was cheating. "Why didn't you say something to me?" They both just shrugged. A couple of weeks later, Tracy Mercer's parents saw Sarah, Mom, and two guys at TGI Fridays in Allentown. They told Tracy about it when they got home. I sat there, dumbfounded. Thank goodness Nana called us for supper. We didn't discuss the problem during dinner, and I excused myself before dessert came. Fortunately, the twins decided to drop the subject for the rest of the night. I was relieved. I just started to look through Kin's laptop when his cell phone rang. It was a text message, DK for snafu LYJ Dirk, sorry for the problems, love Janet. I am not the world's greatest at text messaging, in fact, I am pretty bad, but I had no trouble reading this one. It came from Sarah's cell phone, which meant that Sarah and Janet were together. I couldn't resist the temptation. TJ, thanks a lot, John. Now she knew that I had Ken's cell phone. I spent the next couple of hours looking through files and folders on Ken's computer. There were no emails between Janet and Ken, but there were a few between Ken and some old friends in Lancaster that were interesting. I was astonished by what I read and definitely did not like it. Janet and I had been together almost our whole life, and now I found out that I never really knew her. She seemed to have bonded better with Ken in less than a year than she did with me in almost 20. While I was replacing the printer cartridge, I noticed that I was crying. That is not something that I normally do. She hurt me with her cheating, and now I felt salt in the wounds. Maybe it was from my tears. I printed out several emails and a dozen pictures. I would have done more photos, but I ran out of the expensive paper. There were no pornographic pictures or even anything racy, they were all fit for mixed company. Beth stuck her nose in the door and asked if she could call her mother. I didn't feel that I could refuse. My mother was with the twins while they talked to Janet and overheard everything. She wasn't eavesdropping, but it appeared that the girls weren't trying to hide anything. Mom told me later that they did not cut Janet any slack and blamed the entire problem on her. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. The emails were extremely interesting. Ken had applied for and was hired as an engineer for an alternative power project in Spain. His starting date was in 6 weeks. Apparently, he had not given notice at Gilbert that he was leaving. I'm sure that Sarah knew, but nobody else there mentioned it. He had all the papers ready for the trip except for his passport. I am sure he could get a replacement, but he better hurry if he wanted to make his start date. I guess he could always go to the police and report that I pilfered it, but I didn't think he would do that. He hadn't made any plane reservations yet. One of the emails is to a close friend, explaining a lot of things. Janet was planning on getting a divorce after she joined Ken in Spain. She realized that I would never allow her to take the girls out of the country, so she was going to have me declared an unfit father. The letter didn't go into a lot of detail as to how she was going to accomplish this, but indicated that it would be severe enough to negate visitation rights with the twins or custody. Now that was downright mean. Ken was the one writing this letter, so it was all hearsay. I would have liked to have something original from Janet describing it, but I had to make do with what I had. I printed out several copies of this letter. Mom was falling asleep watching Leno, so I sent her up to her bedroom. The girls were already in bed. I fell asleep on the couch with 4 empty beer bottles on the coffee table. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and bacon. Mom always put out a good breakfast. The girls were finishing their cereal when I made it to the table. I had to endure a few good-natured digs before I could get started on my eggs. The conversation was light until it was time for the bus. Girls, I am afraid that your mother is going to try and separate us. She is planning on having me identified as an unfit parent so that she can have you all to herself. I have no problem with shared custody if that will make the two of you happy, but I will not give up my right to see you and be with you. I don't want you to have 2 sides, but I want you to know what is going on. Be careful and don't listen to any lies. Dad, we are smarter than you think. Don't worry about anything, we love Mom, but we are not going to let her screw you or us. Brittany was smiling, and Beth gave me a thumbs up as they walked out the door. Mom filled my cup and sat down with one of her own. Relax, John, everybody is on your side. After showering and shaving, I put on some clothing that was a little better than I normally wear. I felt a little odd when I left the house because I had 3 cell phones with me. I made a mental note to get a charger for the cell phone that I got from Ken. I probably wouldn't need it, but I'd rather be prepared. I signed in at the Family Services office and waited for a caseworker to call me. I was embarrassed when I finally got called because I happened to know the lady that came out to help me. John Tell, I haven't seen you in over 10 years, what have you been up to? Jod Mitchell was easy to remember in high school, she was one of the goth girls. The goths had their own little group and stuck together. They were ostracized by most of the other kids, especially the jocks, including me. She looked normal now, but I will always remember her by her pink-streaked hair, black lipstick, and dark eye makeup. The funny thing about the goths is that you could never tell if they were into drugs, sexual deviations, or witchcraft. As far as Jod was concerned, it was probably none of those, but you always believe the most outrageous. The nameplate on her desk read J.A. Mitchell, so I assume she never married. 12 years ago, I could understand that, but today she looked, John, what can I do for you? My train of thought is broken by her question. I found myself stammering a little, you look great, Jod. She laughed at my awkwardness, do you mean compared to what I used to look like? Now I was embarrassed, I guess, but I didn't mean to imply anything. Relax, John. I was halfway through college when I realized I was smart enough to face the world as who I was, without the fake facade. I have been in what you would call normal for almost 10 years. I'm a lot more comfortable with normal than before, damn it, but that sounds patronizing. I have a hard time keeping my foot out of my mouth, you will have to excuse me. Forget it. Now, why are you here? Before we start, I need to ask you a question. Do you have a file or report on me, anything at all? Her fingers danced across the keys like a piano player. Nothing here, John. You did marry Janet Wilcox, is that correct? Yes. Nothing under her name either. It looks like the two of you are feeding your kids and not beating them. You do have kids, right? Yeah, we have 12-year-old twin girls, Bethany and Brittany. Okay, now can we get down to the problem that brought you here? Jod, this is a little far-fetched, and I know it might seem hard to believe, but my wife is planning on leaving me and wants to take the girls with her. It's not hard to believe, John. We see it all the time. Doesn't she have to have cause to do something like that? Usually, when the mother comes to us, she has documentation or something to prove the accusation. You just checked, and there is nothing there now, right? That's right, John, but how do I know you are not setting me up because you did something, and she hasn't got around to reporting it yet? Maybe she is getting medical information or police reports before she comes to our office. Just because we aren't showing anything in our computer doesn't mean you didn't do anything. What you were saying is that I can't win? No, I'm not saying that. Why do you think she is going to do something like this? I had no intention of showing anyone the email that Ken had sent, but now I felt that I had no choice. I had to ask myself why I made the copies if I wasn't intending on giving them to anybody. I slid one across the desk to Jod. Where did you get this? I took it off a computer that I obtained illegally. I know it can't be used for any legal reason, but it is some sort of proof of what is going on. The word conspiracy comes to mind, but I don't know the legal definition of it. I want to talk to you or somebody in this office because I didn't know what to do. I don't know how to protect myself and my daughters from something like this, and I can't afford a lawyer. Jod Mitchell relaxed back into her chair. I watched her and did not blink. She rocked back and forth a few times and leaned towards me. Can you come back tomorrow morning? Yes, fine. I will see you then. Can I keep this copy of the email? I nodded. Yes, and turned to walk out the door. It was nice to see you, John. I smiled, and she smiled back. I forgot the goth girl and saw the new Jody. I didn't know any lawyers, and I didn't know any people who knew lawyers, so I had to pick one out of the telephone book. I knew that she was planning on divorcing me, but under the circumstances, things could change. I didn't want to take that chance. I wasn't sure what our financial picture would look like in the next few days or weeks, so I got the lawyer to quote me a price for the whole package up front, and I paid it in cash. I told him to do it the quickest and easiest way he knew. If she wanted the house, she could have it. With the property depreciation, it was worth less than the mortgage. The other thing I insisted on was joint custody of the twins. At a minimum, I would take full custody if he could swing it. I would pay child support but no alimony. On the way to lunch, I got a call from Billy. He needed a place to stay, and of course, I offered to put him up. We met at Taco Bell for the gourmet lunch combo. He had a silly grin on his face when I walked up. I know you can't be that happy. What happened? A friend of mine who works at Community General Hospital gave me a little update on Calvin. Sarah went over there to visit with him. While she was there, Calvin's wife walked in with her 2 kids. Sarah had no idea that she was being played. It got so messy that the hospital security people had to escort Sarah out. I went by Gilbert to talk to her, and she was no longer there, she had quit. I guess she must be at home right now, but I am not sure. Why wasn't his wife living up here with him? I don't know. Why wasn't he going home to his wife and kids on the weekends? Don't know that either. To be honest with you, I don't give a. Billy took a week off from work so he could get things straightened out. I didn't know where he was going to sleep since my mom was staying at the house also, but we decided we would figure something out. He was going to swing by his place to try and pick up some clothing and his personal stuff just in case. Sarah was not there. He decided he didn't want to talk to her after all. I was headed for my insurance agent, but I never made it because the cell phone rang again. John, it's Cameron Wilcox. Can you come over to the house for a while so we can try and sort things out? Janet is a wreck, and her mother isn't helping. Who is going to be there? The three of us and Janet's sister, Carla. I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish, but I'll be there in about 20 minutes. It was a samba group. I took my folder of goodies in with me and declined the coffee. Who wants to start? John, Janet seems to think that you were overreacting a little. She claims that you were raging mad and forced her to say things that were not true in order to calm you down. She claims that she did nothing wrong and you have no right to throw her out. I got the distinct impression that my dear wife had related a very sanitized version of what happened to her parents. I can understand why she would not want to admit her infidelity to them, but resented the fact that she shifted the blame to me. What do you want me to do, Cameron? Prove that she is a liar or admit that I made a mistake. I would just like to see a few facts so we can understand things a little better. What did she tell you about her boyfriend? She claims that she didn't have a boyfriend, she just had a few drinks with some friends that Sarah worked with and that you misinterpreted it. Cameron, in the last month, she had over 80 telephone conversations with this casual friend. How many times did she call you and her mother in the last month? They both looked over at Janet, she looked at her feet instead of at them. Does that sound like a casual friend that she meets occasionally for drinks? No one was speaking as I took out Ken's cell phone. Carla, can you read text messages? This is one that was sent to her casual friend right after I threw her out. Why don't you read it to everyone? Carla handed the phone back to me. Dear Ken, sorry for the problems, love Janet. Carla handed the phone back to me. Does that sound like a casual friend? Janet had her hands in front of her face. Cameron was slowly shaking his head. A couple of weeks ago, Janet and her friend Sarah told everyone they were going shopping at the King of Prussia Mall. The twins begged to go along, but their mother said no. Here are a few pictures that were taken on that trip. I handed Cameron 6 photos, which he looked at and passed to Martha and Carla. That doesn't look like King of Prussia, that looks like Noble's Grove. Damn it, Janet, what is going on? Martha had been quiet up to that point. Janet, in every picture, you were hanging on to this man's arm for dear life. That is not what you do with friends. It appears that the fellow in these pictures, Ken I assume, is far more than a friend. What were you trying to pull here? The tears were flowing slowly and quietly. This was not what she was hoping for. She wasn't expecting the pictures. These are a couple more of the same. 2 of them appear to be from the Olive Garden, and one bears a resemblance to Red Lobster. I have a few more, and happily my devoted wife is dressed in every one of them. John, I apologize for calling you over here, but I think we've seen enough. Cameron appeared displeased at having been duped. We never got to talk about the stains on her underwear because Janet was leaving the room as I was getting up, crying like a baby. It was unnecessary at that point, I suppose. Cameron led the way to the entrance. John, Joe, I am sorry that we can't undo what has been done, but I guarantee you that it will not be ignored. Shaking my hand, I walked out. When I got home, Mom and Billy were sleeping in the den with a rollaway bed. I kept the computer in a small extra room that wasn't really a den. Billy had a stack of extra clothing in the corner that he had received from his home. When he went to visit Sarah, she wasn't there. When I got home, the mail was the most interesting thing waiting for me. It was actually a nice official envelope from the passport department waiting for Janet, not for me. Even though I knew I shouldn't have opened it, I couldn't resist. It was a passport, of course, but a family passport, to be more precise. Janet was pictured with the 2 girls. Although I never thought it would be used for this purpose, I recalled the girls telling me they had their picture taken. Naturally, the envelope contained no passport for me. I gave Cameron a call right away and instructed him to notify Janet that it had arrived. All she had to do was send Ken to the house to retrieve her passport. Only Ken would get it from me. I never would have known she received the mail if I had been at work when it arrived. Cameron told me that they didn't know where Janet was going, so they asked her to find another place to stay. They seemed a little enraged with their daughter. True to his word, he informed her about the passport. The girls were the main topic of conversation during the interesting dinner conversation. We had a visitor from Family Services today at school, Bethany said, flashing a sly little smile. Would you like to expand on that a little? Did she speak to you together or separately? At one point, the two of us. She introduced herself as Jody and said, you two attended the same high school. We went to the same high school at the same time, but we weren't together. Britt gave me a sidelong glance for being such a moron. Dad, pay attention. What was it that she wanted to discuss with you? She spoke with us for more than an hour. We missed geography class and the gym. I was having problems keeping up with them both as they were talking at the same time. Carla called during dinner, saying she was ready to talk. At McDonald's, I ran into Janet's sister. We sat at a corner table and shared 2 piping hot coffees. Janet asked me to try and explain what was happening, John, because she was unable to do it on her own. I know it sounds silly, but how will you respond to questions I have? I'm not sure I can. I can only speak, and you have to listen. The majority of what she told me sounded like gibberish, so I'm sure I'll mess some of it up anyhow. You were putting me in a position where you could tell me you don't have any answers, justifications and excuses. John, I've always known you're intelligent. I have other things to do, so let's finish this up. She first places all the blame on Sarah. Sarah began to cheat on Billy while feigning passion and romance. Janet claimed that the only exciting and romantic experiences she had ever had were from you, who was dependable and loving. Sarah talked Janet into going out to drinks and a few meals with them after Kin Sanders started working at Gilbert. When they were together, Janet and Kin would frequently be left alone when Sarah and Calvin went out for a little romance. They eventually began to play around as well, and soon enough it had developed into a serious affair. She was unable to stop it once it got going or chose not to. She was captivated by Ken's tales of his adventures and was eager to accompany him to experience everything firsthand. She jumped at the chance to travel to Spain when he asked. Leaving the girls was the bigger issue than leaving you. She would find a way to portray you as a bad father because she knew you would never allow her to take them abroad. She now realizes that was a mistake. She came to the realization that the girls were closer to you than she was after speaking with them. She made the decision that if you consented to a divorce with no conditions, she would not try to adopt the twins. Billy informed me that Sarah had returned to her parents' home in the vicinity of Afrara, and he was returning to his place until he could either sell it or rent it out. He went to the bank, the insurance company, and the lawyer's office in the morning. They didn't have a company policy prohibiting fraternization, so he wanted to try and extort some money from Gilbert, but his lawyers warned him it would be difficult. When he dropped by the hospital, he learned that Calvin was getting out. His wife was handling the paperwork for his release. She caught Billy before he could flee and explained to him that she was attempting to persuade Calvin to withdraw the charges against him. She thanked him for all of his help, which really surprised him because it seemed like she had been trying unsuccessfully for a number of years to get Calvin to behave himself. I just sat on the front porch and drank beer after Billy left. My mother got me a meatloaf sandwich and we had a long conversation. She drank a beer, but she remained silent. She mentioned that her father would be spending the night after dinner. Mom went inside the house as soon as Jod Mitchell pulled up. Jod sat next to me, but he declined my offer of a cold beer. Before she spoke, we sat for a short while. About an hour ago, I served Janet the papers. She was a very irate woman. By the way, she's staying with her sister. I completed the long neck I was holding. Well, that's a plus, I suppose, but why am I feeling so horrible? John, in situations like this, there's nothing good, only less bad. I reached into the cooler for another beer, paused, and put it back. Would you please come by and let the girls know what's going on? Although I get along well with them, no matter how tactfully I phrase things, it will come across as a mother-shaming attempt. If I do that, I fear I will somehow alienate them. That's not what I want to do. What about tonight at 7? She got up and headed to her car, and I gave her a nod. I grinned at her halfway stop and glanced back. It was a positive sign. She gave me a smile in return. That evening, Jod stopped by and chatted with Beth and Britt for a while. Billy and I were occupied with sorting through his belongings and getting rid of anything that belonged to Sarah or made him think of her. Several times a week, Jod began visiting the house. Before long, she was spending as much time with my mom as she was with the girls. She was ignoring me, and while I was fine with it, I was curious. She sat down next to me one night after the girls had gone to bed. I felt compelled to speak with her, but she spoke before me, so I missed my opportunity. "Danny, do you have any wine?" "Well, in a way. I needed to work on my conversational skills still." "How do you mean?" "I don't own anything that contains a cork. All of the wine I have has screw tops on it." It appeared that she found that amusing. "Give me something red, will you, and bring the bottle?" The bottle was really more of a jug, but it didn't seem to bother her. We took a sip after I poured. At last, I made myself break the ice. "I suppose the visits are benefiting the girls greatly. How much longer must you spend with them?" "The twins, are good. I'm not needed to be seen. I've come over to visit with you." "I do not comprehend. When you were here, you didn't even really talk to me. I assumed that was your desire." "Not really. I was just afraid that you had some sort of rules against fraternizing with customers." I felt more at ease when she laughed softly. "I'm amazed that you haven't even asked to see my tattoo." "Ink? What are the tattoos?" She was obviously trying to loosen me up by getting me involved in some trivial conversation. I thought the plan was well thought out. I received 4 of them while I was still a high school student. While 3 are simple to locate, 1 is more challenging. "Are you going to show them to me, or do I have to look for them?" "It's more fun if you look, but I'll need a little bit more wine if you are going to do that." When I filled her glass to the brim, we both laughed. Because we had to stay silent to avoid waking the girls, the hunt was much more thrilling. To be honest, I spent a considerable amount of time admiring the 4th one before she pushed me away because it was in a very private area. I had the strange impression that the twins knew what had happened, even though she left before they got out of bed. I instructed my phone book attorney to complete and deliver the divorce documents. Janet was going to have to accept my offer or figure it out on her own. The papers were served while she was still residing with Carla. I did not receive a call, and there was no response. A few more weeks went by. My dad's situation was not good. Mom was staying there longer than she was at my house. Fortunately, the girls moved in with her for the summer as school was about to end for the year. Dad had been moved into an assisted living facility by the end of the summer. After Billy and I prepared the family home for sale, Mom moved back in with me. Jod had been spending 3 or 4 nights a week with me and seeing the girls at Mom's place all summer. They went dining out and shopping together, and I was glad that Britt and Bethany were receiving attention. I was no longer envious of them, at least. I had a strong suspicion that they were aware of Jod and my relationship. Janet spoke with the girls once a week on the phone, but Mom said that most of the time, Janet seemed stressed and the conversations were brief. I wasn't even informed that she had called by the twins. Billy and Sarah had finalized their divorce. I had no idea how mine was going. In addition, he had made the decision to launch his own surveying company and had asked me to join him. Before Mom came to the rescue, I didn't have quite enough money to make a contribution. Medicare would cover his costs if she and Dad ran out of money. She believed that I should utilize it for the business rather than watching it all disappear. She may have also considered it an investment in her future, in my opinion. After a span of 3 months, Billy and I established our own small survey company. Fortunately, I was good at drafting and could also draw plots. After the new semester began, the twins received a visit from their mother approximately a week later. They were both disappointed to see Janet because they had assumed they would be seeing Jody at the guidance office. Even though they made an effort to treat her with courtesy and respect, things didn't work out. She expressed her love for them both and her regret that things didn't turn out the way they did. She would send them some postcards from her trip to see the windmills in Spain. She assured them she would send them amazing Christmas presents and that she would give them a call on their birthday each year. When she left, they said, she was crying. The following week, Janet's parents arrived at the house, but she never gave me a call to let me know that she was leaving. They expressed their regret for Janet's actions once more, but they made no effort to support or explain them. Their only grandchildren, Brittany and Bethany, were something they wished to see. With their request, I had no issues at all. They claimed Carla was divided between her parents and her sister and was too embarrassed to visit me. After 2 months, my divorce was finalized. To celebrate, Jord and I went to Red Lobster. Their rare night out apart from the girls didn't seem to bother them. Actually, I think they were kind of relieved. We stayed at the Holiday Inn in the area that night. When I returned home at 10 o'clock the following morning, the twins were ecstatic. They smiled from ear to ear the entire day without saying anything. After a year, the business was flourishing, but sadly, Dad passed away. Mom didn't want to leave the girls, but she did want to move to Florida with her sister. Grandma should go, the twins felt. They told me quite clearly that Jod could take her place. She was not as good a cook as my mom, but they also insisted they were old enough for their own room. It was a sensible plan, and it was obvious. Their mother sent birthday cards to the girls, but she didn't call. She also sent out a large number of postcards, all of which featured Spanish windmills. What the significance of that was, I did not know. She had not expected the growth spurt that young girls approaching their adolescent years experience, so she had sent them 2 elegantly embroidered dresses for Christmas. The fact that the dresses were too small didn't seem to bother either of them. The largest client we have now is Gilbert Engineering. Billy was relieved to hear that Alvin had taken a major step down from his previous job and was now teaching electronics at the Lebanon County Vocational School. Sarah had remarried and relocated to California, so he was no longer married. After only 6 months at his new job, Ken Sanders was working somewhere in the United States, but no one seemed to know. Billy had tried to find out by getting in touch with his high school alumni association. My closest friend used to think that I gave Ken too much leeway. The girls were still receiving postcards featuring windmills, which was strange. The cards were always blank inside, bearing only general sentiments. Cameron informed me that Janet, who was employed by a travel agency in Barcelona, had contacted them multiple times. She never brought up Ken or provided them with any details about their past interactions. Jod and I flew to Maryland for a quiet marriage retreat. A year later, she was pregnant. Just like us, Brittany and Bethany were ecstatic about having a little goth girl for a sister. The girls never told me about it, but I think it was a private joke between them and their new mother. If you've made it this far, listener, please click the subscribe button. It will be very beneficial.